the Exiles emerged from a load of research I did in 2011 and 2012, where I interviewed locals in the community, sort of men and women who had a sort of deep experience in the 60s and 70s in the Smethwick area. There were people who were part of the constellation of my family unit, faces I'd grown up with, who carry stories that I'd been hearing and seeing as a little one, really. So I found a load of archive from the 60s that gave me visual proof for the first time of the phenomenon of these newly arriveds, an era that I'd never been able to get close to, other than testimony, and testimony was often quite sparse on detail. So having found that imagery, I was able to take it to people and go, look at this, and often it would trigger in them deep memories that they'd sort of forgotten, and consequently I was able to gather, I think, quite momentous tales in a way, local folklore really. And so from that, I made a film called Year Zero Black Country, which collages 20 short stories, and that piece of work has been the sort of birth point of the Exiles. The idea for the actual images, I think the images were set free by seeing the work of Stan Douglas, Gregory Cruton, Tracy Moffat, Sean Tan to a degree, artists that I admire, and I think they gave me the sort of freedom to sort of go off and embark on telling these stories that are on these walls, stories I think that deeply probe those early experiences and the kind of psychological journeys that the characters are on, the kind of soul journeys they were on, so that's kind of the genesis really, I trained at the National Film and Television School after making my first documentary about race riots in Exiles in 2005. The film was seen by somebody from that school. I'd never heard of it, and that person told me to apply for the directing course. I did. I got on, and that meant I had this sort of big leap in my mid-20s and joined an arena of artists and creatives who are really top of their game. And as a consequence, I got to sort of see firsthand what lighting can do, what good set design can do, and all the rest of it, But I kind of got spat out and worked in the industry for a few years, and I found the industry quite a difficult place to operate. There was a sort of denial of self going on. Commissioners didn't want to know your personal stories, didn't really care too much for your authenticity. It was the era of Benefit Street, it was the era of tawdry, taking advantage of people, a really sickly reflection on our society, to be fair, and I found it painful to be there, to be fair. So I sort of stepped away from it and entered the art realm because I felt freer in the art realm, So that's sort of how it began. Then the image day shift is as a sort of, we shot on the set of Peaky Blinders, set of load of 2 up, 2 downs, and we just thought, right, let's go and put 6 or 7 stories, into this one image, stories that are part of the ancestral webbing of the community, So, for example, there's a story that my dad has told me and his mates have told me about 2 fellas who having arrived from India, weren't aware the swans were the Queen's subjects, So they'd behead them with a machete and flog the meat on the market. And it's a story that's always had me in stitches, and the veracity of it, I'm not entirely sure of, but stories do change shape and form. But I like it, and it pings around, so I'm trying to sort of reflect that. I found 2 characters in a local gym who are illegal immigrants, we gave them 50 quid each to come along and get onto our set and take that role on. And there are other stories that have similar sort of heritage in the community. And the people we cast for, we are very particular around who they are. And that's maybe the filmmaker in me or the documentarian in me, They had to be either children of that generation, so they could psychologically enter the space of their ancestors, which leads to then powerful performances, or they had to be people who've just arrived, so they can speak directly to the experience because it's their lived experience right now. And that was our criteria for the casting, And then in terms of the finesse of the image, we got 2 12-ton trucks. We had a crew of about 15 people, and a big cast as well. So it was quite a spectacle, really. And we worked over 2 days, really, in the evenings, and to create the sort of effect of a heightened psychological space where the image is so rich in colour that it sort of pays homage, really, I think, to to that time and that period, a homage that I think doesn't exist when I look around in terms of what's being made, you know, and I think it's an era deserving of a homage, because it's really when the colour palette of Britain and even Europe shifted forever, you know. And for me, that, as a consequence, is the origin point of my story in Britain, and I want to honour that, you know. So